First of all, just want to welcome everybody tonight to Spike Camp. We're very excited. We've put together a partnership with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance to do a series on goats, and not just hunting, but pretty much all things surrounding mountain goats, citizen science, biology, of course, hunting, populations, the health of the population, all those things. So tonight we've got two very special guests joining us. We've got Julie Cunningham. Julie is, I'm going to let her do an introduction here after I finish up, and I'll turn it over to both. But Julie is a very active wildlife biologist, conservationist. She's from Montana, and she brings a lot of knowledge to the table when it comes to goats. And we're really excited to have her on board tonight. So she's sharing a presentation and fielding some questions, I'm sure. And then we've got our good buddy Darryn Epp, who's a gypsy these days. He's on the road. I think the end destination is Sheep Show. Is that right? I think you're headed that direction. Darryn is also very involved with the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. He's a board member, and Darryn has a presentation as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn I guess I'll turn it over to both of you. We'll start ladies first. Julie, if you want to give us a short bio, then we'll flip it to Darryn and he can do the same and then roll into his presentation. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Julie Cunningham. I'm an area wildlife biologist in Bozeman, Montana. So for you folks not familiar with the state, where I'm at is right next to Yellowstone National Park. So I'm in Southwest Montana. I've been in Montana since 1997, been a biologist here with Fish, Wildlife and Parks for a little more than 17 years. Pretty fortunate to get to manage mountain goats. I'm a big game wildlife biologist, and so I really enjoy all things ungulates, and have been really happy to say I've been with RMGA since its very inception.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you very much. And we'll flip over to Darryn, and you can do the same. Give us a little short intro.
Actually, my intro was part of the presentation sheets, or the
Okay.
thing that I prepared. So we may as well just start right into that, and
You got
I'll
it.
get my stuff in there too.
Okay, sounds good.
So I just put together just a brief little summary of what the Goat Alliance is for those probably that are joining us that perhaps may not be familiar, part of other organizations, either in BC or other ways or other places. So essentially our mission is to support and conserve Rocky Mountain goat populations across their North American habitats. Next slide. And this is me, Darryn Epp. I'm one of the directors of the RMGA. I am a resident of Alberta. When I'm not chasing animals around, I'm a pressure equipment inspector. I typically do that a couple months, or probably 3 or 4 months a year, and spend the rest of the time enjoying the south, sometimes in the wintertime, which I'm kind of doing now, and taking pictures of wildlife typically along the way. I've been a life member since 2014, board member for 6 years, and I'm also part of the Science and Conservation Committee, which Julie is part of as well. Next slide. This speaks about the beginnings of the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. It was established as a 501c3 charitable organization in 2014 when a young man from Michigan named Peter Munich moved to Montana and immediately developed a passion for mountain goats. He was compelled to do more for an unrepresented species. So he connected with Julie, that we have on board here today, and try to find ways to contribute in a conservation way. They had or created some ideas that were focused around citizen science and the possibility of doing ground population surveys that may have been lacking in some areas, and could possibly help inform those agencies about certain areas or specific areas, population inventories, and possibly impact hunting allocation numbers in a positive way. Next slide. And RMGA is the only organization focused on mountain goat conservation across US and Canada. Next slide. Basically, we do three different things. 4 core programs are what we are known for. The first one being citizen science projects, ground-based surveys. That's kind of where we started mostly. Very primary role of what we do still. Ground-based population counts are carried out by RMGA members and volunteers, partnering with local, state, and provincial agencies and Indigenous wildlife managers to conduct mountain goat counts in various prioritized regions. RMGA, just in this last year, has developed a standard operating procedure to assist wildlife managers in developing citizen science-based ground count protocols that suit their specific needs while maximizing scientific rigor. This is kind of something that we had found lacking a bit, gaining credibility with all of the different regions that mountain goats live, and agencies that potentially didn't know much about the Goat Alliance. We've been trying to work on ways to help them understand that our intent is to provide the best possible information that they can use to make management decisions. So Julie, again, has been a huge part of that, and she'll be talking about some of that stuff later as well. We've developed a few videos that support this concept of what we do with ground-based counts as well. So that I'm sure some of you have probably seen a couple that we have put out, and we got one more in the works right now to round it out, to kind of promote ourselves and these capabilities with agencies around North America. Next slide. Probably some of you have seen also on our social media and some other areas, potentially like Idaho now, where we have done some initial educational and testing protocols for mountain goat hunting in that region this year. Development of educational materials, including hunter training, highlighting sex identification, citizen science volunteer training, and supporting student education. Probably if some of you follow us also on social media, I try to get in usually weekly an image or two that help us to quizzes, basically, to help us to identify the different characteristics between nannies and billies, so that we can make wise decisions if we're hunting and a particular sex is what we're targeting. I know that most jurisdictions that we're looking to harvest billies, because populations of goats are very sensitive to overharvest of nannies. So typically it's the billies that we're trying to focus on, and doing that sex education testing is critical to ensuring that people that head into the field and are selecting an animal all do so with the best education possible. They certainly are very tricky to identify, so that's one of the major things that we're involved in. We have a great, also a great video online on our website that was produced probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it's excellent for general information on mountain goats. Next slide. The other part to what we are typically involved in is the research and conservation side of things. We support, lots of different scientific studies. A little bit of money here and there goes a long ways with some of these smaller studies. Some of them we get multi-year study funding as well. So RMGA facilitates a Science and Conservation Committee consisting of biologists, wildlife managers, and academia who review grant applications and provide expertise on mountain goat conservation. This team of experts also guides the board of directors in making decisions that require the technical background of their vast experience. This team that we have is quite a powerhouse team, and Julie is just one portion of it. But we have representation from Alaska, BC, Idaho, Montana, and I think Daria is from Ontario, but did a bunch of research up in Northwest Territories, and she's got actually a webinar coming up here on July 18th, and if you go to our social media pages, that will be on there. And her topic is mountain goat genetic sequencing to study demography and adaptive history. So that should be a very interesting webinar coming up here on January 18th. So yeah, we're really thankful for the team that supports the board of directors from a whole variety of backgrounds and influences. So next slide. This is just one example of the one project that RMGA supports. We have supported the Caw Ridge study in Caw Ridge, Alberta. This has been a multi-year study that we have supported financially. This study focuses on a continued long-term monitoring of marked animals within the only goat population that has been intensively studied for over 30 years. The central objective is to increase knowledge on population demography and the other factors affecting annual and long-term variation in population dynamics and individual life history traits in order to recommend the management options to conserve mountain goat populations. I actually had a chance this last June to go up and visit this site. Incredible work that they're doing there, and one of the biggest features that I noticed while I was there is the extreme amount of impact that they're having on students in this particular site. Their conditions on this site are definitely rough. It almost shocked me a little bit going up to where they're located at, and the intensity of the transportation and stuff to get up there, and the weather, and just the remoteness. It was quite interesting to see how these very young students, in most cases, are put into this atmosphere and learn from these professors that are certainly very well conditioned to this kind of atmosphere and environment, and I was very impressed by that, and that's one of the reasons why we support them as much as we do, is the opportunity that they give future generations to supporting study of goats. Next slide.
I think that might be the end of the slides there, Darryn.
That might be it. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, yeah, as long as nobody else has any questions, that I'll just pass it off to Julie, and she'll kind of tell us the rest.
Just a quick question while Julie's teeing it up there. Darryn, can you tell us, is there a training program, like a certification program for sexing goats and stuff? Is that coming to BC? I heard a rumor that could be coming down.
That rumor is certainly true. Yeah, we have been working on a program with Silvercore, actually, and we had it pretty much done, but then sent it out to several people for comment, and we got some really good feedback on it, and have decided that we're going to revamp it a little bit to get a little bit, modernize it, let's call it a little bit, so it's not so institutional and maybe a little bit more engaging. And so yeah, that is definitely coming up, and it's kind of this program that we did in Idaho is just a portion of that. We had to kind of put it out very quickly because they asked us to do that in a very short time span. So we kind of pulled together part of what we had, but we certainly want to have that full and interactive training and testing program that we're hoping actually to provide to several other jurisdictions to use at their request.
That's great news. That's awesome. Okay. All right. I think that's the only question I had. Blake, is there anything from the audience for Darryn? Did you see?
I don't think so. I think there's some chat going on in there, but no specific questions. So we could jump over to Julie.
Sure. And then any questions, we'll get to them after.
Okay, so do you guys see my slide?
Yep.
Okay, great. I've got actually way too many computer screens, so I'll make sure that this works. All right, let's see. Did it switch? Okay, I got to do it this way. All right, okay, the slide switch, everything look good?
Yeah, looks good.
Great. I always have to start a talk when I can with what exactly is a mountain goat. Everybody likes to say they're not really goats. They're not. There's, taxonomy, the way it works. We've got kingdoms, phylums, class, orders, family, genus, species. And genus is like cousins, and if you're in a subfamily, you're kind of like second cousins. So what we've got is domestic sheep and wild sheep are actually pretty closely related. They're just a different genus. Kind of like a coyote and a wolf and a dog are different genuses. Mountain goats are their own genus. And in fact, so if you want to go back and see what are they most closely related to, we'd call them rupicaprins or rock goats. The closest of all of these really cool radiation of caprins is actually the chamois. But you can see how diverse these caprins are. I think some of the ones like the Himalayan tar are just fascinating. And you can look at all these and see across the globe features that are in common with our mountain goat and features that are different. So if you guys want to know what our mountain goat is, I had to give you those slides. But to really get into the management of mountain goats, I'm going to be a little bit Montana focused, but I think that you all can probably see that wherever you're from, goats are native if they're generally west of the Continental Divide. And generally east of the Continental Divide, that's where they've been transplanted to. And so in different provinces and states, my slide kind of shows you where they've been native and where they've been introduced. And I had to show you some pretty cool history slides. And here's how we did it in Montana. Stuffed goats into super cubs. Had to put those hoses on their horns so they didn't knock through the sides of the flying surface. We'd put goats in rafts, raft them down the South Fork of the Flathead out of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, put them in panniers on the backs of a mule. If you could look close, you'd see that the horns of this goat are tied off on the side of the crate so that it wouldn't gore the mule in the rear end. Our predecessors were pretty badass, pretty amazing what they were capable of doing out there. So goats also showed themselves really capable of handling transplants and moving to all these new areas. In this graphic, the larger dots, the green dots, are where goats were released. And then the red dots are where they moved. Goats are pioneers, they're explorers, and they've done quite well at colonizing habitats they weren't even introduced to. They move in and thrived. So when you look at, this is the big question, not just in Montana, but across a lot of mountain goat range. Native ranges have been struggling, and some places where they've been introduced, they're booming. In Montana, we are no exception. Areas where they were native, west of our continental divide, they've struggled. Where we have released them, they've really grown, especially in our Southwest Montana Region 3. This is where I'm located. There's a lot of reasons we think about why, and that could be a subject for a whole nother talk to itself. One thing is in the very old days, 60s, 70s, our state agency didn't believe we could harvest too many. They didn't think people were really going up the mountain to harvest these goats, so we didn't regulate them as closely as we started to later. But that question again, why are introduced populations doing better than native herds, is likely the combination of many things. And depending on which expert you talk with, they may emphasize different points. There could be disease. Goats are susceptible to the same pneumonia complex that can challenge bighorn sheep, that MOV, if you guys have heard of it, the pneumonia. Goats are susceptible to that. Predation. Eagles, mountain lions, even wolves. Climate and habitat changes are at the forefront of a lot of what goat biologists talk about, how fire suppression and increased heat in summers, conifer encroachment, how all this relates to goats. Some are concerned about small population risks. The term allele effect or demographic stochasticity, if you only have a handful of goats and just by random odds, flip of the coin, the females throw billies instead of nannies, that could shrink the population right there. Disturbance, recreation, heliskiing, there's questions about their impacts on goats. Past effects from too much hunter harvest or too many females in harvest, too high a harvest rates, perhaps because goats are too hard to count in many places. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, the cumulative effects of just all of it. What I'll say I'm proud of this. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks recognize our introduced populations as just as valuable as the native. And in some areas, introduced populations are, well, I guess, considered challenging to potentially native plant communities, and folks wonder if they should be maintained on the landscape as a non-native animal. But in Montana, what we realize, our mountain goats came from Montana genetics. They bring the most hunter opportunity in these introduced areas. We've not identified any problems or challenges to the habitat yet or competition with other mountain ungulates yet. And we've actually started coming up with ideas that these introduced herds where goats seem to be thriving could become source populations to help restore native herds into the future. There's a research proposal afoot with exactly this question in mind. So what this comes down to is mountain goat management count data are important. What's going on with your goats on the mountain? Goats can be susceptible to overharvest. This is additive mortality. They live life on the edge. There's not a lot of room to bear. You think about like white-tailed deer. They throw twins, triplets. Mountain goats don't. They have one young at a time. They don't have young till they're a little bit older in life, and they don't live very long. A female can get to be 16 years, but that is incredibly old. As a state agency, we issue hunting licenses. approximately for 3 to 7% of the count or population estimate for an introduced herd. We're more conservative for native herds. So if you opened up the hunting regulations for Montana, you'd look and see in Western Montana regions 1 and 2, very few licenses. The bulk of the mountain goat licenses you would find in Montana are in region 3, where I'm at, Southwest Montana. But when we go out and we do counts, we want to look at the kids. Is reproduction healthy? Are there a lot of kids being produced? That's important to know. I mean, if there's not a lot of kids, that could be a sign of pneumonia, which can often impact the young. Then we want to know about the billies. Are there plenty of males available to harvest? Getting good mountain goats is harder than you might think. Now, the picture on the left is pretty great. I can tell you how many goats are in that herd, and they're a nice wide open place. The picture on the right, they're running in and around this little archway that was a little hard to dip and dodge with the helicopter. And if we went a little higher, the sun had come right through our windscreen and blind us, and they were a little hard to count. Well, one of the things that's really funny is if you ask a biologist, when's the best time to survey goats, they're all going to give you different answers. I've even asked, our helicopter pilot is really into mountain goats, and I've asked him across the whole state, and he's worked in Alaska, when's the best time to survey mountain goats? He says it depends on the biologist. Some people will survey in winter when they can track them down, but then you're looking for a white animal on white snow. Some biologists like to survey them in the summer, but if it's hot, they hide. They get into caves, they get into trees, and you can't find them, and then there's smoke. So summer has challenges. Fall can be a great time to get them because it cools off and they're up on the ridges, but that's when hunting season's on. And how would you guys like it as a hunter if FWP bombs the goats that you're trying to hunt with a helicopter and scatters them to all creation? So every season's got its own challenges. Ground counting can be quite effective, and that's what the rest of my work's going to talk about. There's been some real pioneering work, and if you want to get into the science, Jamie Belt is a biologist in Glacier National Park. She is just really driven a citizen science program for mountain goat survey and inventory there that's inspirational. Jesse DeVoe works with FWP now. He got his master's degree at MSU on ground-based counting, survey and inventory for mountain goats. These guys have shown ground counts can be effective. And Jamie Belt in particular looked at citizen science counts. And she had some pretty high power science with double observers, double blind, in mixture models, Bayesian statistics. What I've kind of worked with is a little more simple, straightforward management style minimum counts. And I'll show you what I did and what the Goat Alliance has helped me do for years and how well it's worked. We've worked together for 10 years now and conducted 10 surveys in 3 hunting districts in Southwest Montana. Over on the right, the little graphic, little map, if you can see it, is the Bridger Mountains. This is a real key area for work with the Goat Alliance for a lot of reasons. But this is 1 hunting district, we've worked in 3. What we do is we'll send teams of observers out into the mountains to predetermined locations on the same day in a narrow time window. So your goal is whatever little colored ellipse you're in, whatever little patch is yours to survey, get out there between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. I chose that time based on learning about the goats. In the middle of the day, they're not very active. Early in the mornings, it's just so hit or miss getting people out there. In the evenings, they really come out. They'll come out right at dark sometimes, and they do start moving in the early afternoon. So if we're all in the same time window, though, goats move enough that if you guys can see my map, I could be counting them on Sacagawea, and 4 hours later, they could be on hardscrabble. So we need to have a narrow time window to prevent getting duplicates. But in this case, you can see this mountain range is pretty accessible, and we can get enough people out there. So we round up volunteers, and this is where the Goat Alliance is just a star. They've done this for years and done it really effectively. They get some phenomenal volunteers together. And we do a training session. This is at Stone Glacier headquarters here in Bozeman. We got everybody together. We showed the videos. We talk about how to tell the difference between billies and nannies. We talk about, all right, you've got this area. Here's how you get there. Here's the trail. Here's the viewing points. If we're in an area with grizzly bears, you got to be in a group. Here's how to make sure you're bear safe. Make sure you've got a check-in, check-out procedure. And then we go over data collection protocols. What I have to say as a wildlife biologist, a game biologist for a fish and game agency, one of the intrinsic benefits to me of these counts is getting the people involved in the management of their wildlife. That fellow on the left was a tag holder almost every year. The tag holders get to come out. They get the knowledge, they get the practice, they get help scouting, they get to learn the environment, and they get more success when they get to get out. And all those other people who are lined up there want a goat tag some year. Maybe some of them have had one in the past. Maybe some put in every year and they think, hey, I can't hunt a goat this year, but I can scout and I can learn. So when I draw my tag, I'll be ready. What a great benefit. I've had people come from different states and all across Montana to get the experience to really scout out mountain goats. And in return, because these are motivated people, I get fantastic data. And it's so rewarding to see the public connect with the wildlife that they own. So the data we collect is pretty simple. Like I say, a team goes out. I need to know the location of the goat. I send everybody with topo maps because I'm old school. But what's great these days is everybody's got their phone and everybody uses Onyx. And it's awesome. They send me their Onyx files. I got great data points. I just need a lat long of where the goat was. I need the time when the start time was that you observed that goat and the end time. So if you observed a goat from 4 p.m. till 5 and it wandered off, then if somebody else saw it from 7 till 9, it might be a duplicate, right? So the time of observation helps me winnow out duplicates. I have people write down the behavior. So say, hey, this is 7 goats moving north. That way, if they lose track of 7 goats moving north at 5 p.m. and somebody else finds 7 goats coming in from the south at 7 p.m., then it might be the same goats. I need the total count and classifications to billies, nannies, and kids if possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes we see them at a long distance. Sometimes we see them up close. But I ask for the classification data. Then I go through the data when I bring it back to FWP, and I realize different groups may see the same individuals because somebody on one side of a ridge and somebody on the other, and mountain goats can traverse a ridge like nothing. So I have a little algorithm based on step length of goats, the movement, the rate that they have, and the distance they'll move every 2 hours, just because I've got some, I'll give you the spoiler, I've got some goat collars in the area, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So I know a little bit about how they move. I can remove duplicates based on the composition of the group, the number, like if it's a group of 5 billies or somebody sees a group of 7 nannies and kids, probably different. The behavior, the time of the sighting, all that. I really go through it to try to remove duplicate sightings. So how good are we? I'm going to show you guys these graphs. These are 2 districts. 2 of the 3 districts we've worked in, we work in all the time. There's one district that counts didn't work out great in. We haven't gone back in there. But we've really focused on the Henry's Mountains and the Bridger Mountains. So in the red circles are ground counts done by Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. Anything that's not in the circles were aerial surveys. And of course, the trend lines are going up because remember, these are introduced populations. The Bridgers, they were introduced in 1968. And the Henrys, they colonized it. We didn't know we had goats until around 2010. What's really cool is, again, credit to the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance. Because of these ground counts that the Goat Alliance did, we were able to open this hunting district. And now there's 4 mountain goat licenses in it, 1 of which went to Idaho, 3 of which stays in Montana. And that's all thanks to the Goat Alliance ground counts. So that's why the trend lines are going up. But hey, our data look really good. Of the 10 surveys we've done, 1 ended up not working out really good in the Bridgers. And that was due to the day that we did it, the wind shifted and a whole bunch of smoke rolled in and we just couldn't see anything and it was hot as heck. And the goats didn't come out. So, but hey, a 9 out of 10 is great. So the data look good. How good are they really? How many goats were out there that weren't observed? I laugh at this little picture of me. That's me in the picture. The goats are literally right there, and I've turned my back to them and looking away from them to kind of make the joke about where are the goats? But so how many goats were not observed? I have to tell you an anecdote before I get into more data. One of the anecdotes was in August 2018. Goat Alliance did a ground count. We found 58 goats, 14 kids. Good classification. A week or so later, Idaho Fish and Game did a helicopter count of this Henry's Mountain units. Like I said, Henry's Mountains overlaps the Continental Divide, so it's part Montana, part Idaho. That's why Montana FWP is involved in this. and Idaho Fish and Game's involved in this. Idaho Fish and Game counted 57 goats with 14 kids. I loved how close we were, and especially down to the classification. So I was like, God, these ground counts are really good. Then we got an opportunity to test it. We have collared goats on the landscape in the Bridgers now. So what percentage of collared goats do we see? If we see 80% of the collared goats, then maybe we saw 80% of the population. Let's do some population estimates. You see this little collared goat was trying to hide from me, but I got him. We have 14 mountain goats collared, 11 females, 3 males. This was one of if you guys ever asked me what my best day of my job was in 17 years, this was the day when we were up on the ridge slinging these in winter. I mean, I worked out there for just weeks during the summer doing additional collaring efforts, but we had a really good team, a good biologist, a fantastic aerial capture crew, and got our hands on a lot of goats. So anyway, we had these collars out there. The collars yield locations every 2 hours, and you can remotely download them. This is the interface a biologist sees. What I did was I just queried 3 goats to show you the pathways, or 4 goats. There's the yellow, blue, green, and red, and you can see their little pathways. Every little point is one of the locations we get. I can download this on my computer. So we go to the count, I go look at the computer, and I say, okay, red was on hard scrabble, blue moved from Sacagawea to hard scrabble. I can figure out each color goat where it was during the ground count and was it observed. So let me tell you the results. It's pretty great. In 2022, our goat alliance count was 93. We had observed 77% of the collars and estimated the population at 121. In 2023, we counted 103 goats, 83% of the collars observed, and the population estimate's 124. What I love about this is the percent of collars observed was really close. The population estimates are really close. The total counts are right on. So, I mean, we always expect observability to go up and down, but I just think these results turned out consistent. Ground counts work. I love this picture. This smiling young man was up. This is right before it starts going dusk and goats come right out on him up at Baldy Peak there. Ground counts work. The observability we just reported that we just found is comparable with flight data. In some areas, flight data isn't even that good. It's 60%. So we're doing really good here in the Bridgers. We saw that these ground counts are replicable. We saw also that observers did a good job of identifying the billies and nannies. Like I mentioned to you, there's 3 colored billies and 11 colored nannies. People called it right. So if they said this is a colored goat, they were pretty much right on. My recommendations to any other managers is do it in a place where goat range is discreet and approachable. If you just have people scattered out over a vast wilderness, you could miss a lot, and that'll be challenged. You'll still get data, but these island mountain ranges, like I showed you in the Bridgers, they just work so great. I really recommend people do them early in the summer before heat and smoke come in, and know the activity patterns of the goats in your area so you can get your survey window just right. Keep that window narrow. Goats move. So if you can just carpet the landscape with people and get those counts, you'll have really good coverage. So to kind of sum up what RMGA has helped do in Southwest Montana, we added that hunting district, the Henry's Mountains one, added 4 goat licenses. Like I say, 1 went to an Idaho hunter. The count data enabled more tags in the hands of hunters responsibly. And I can have the science in the background to say, we're not going to over-harvest them. Our harvest rate's good. Goat Alliance also has research grant programs. We did get a grant in the Bridger Mountains to support the goat research effort there. We actually have a recreation study. The reason we collared the goats was for a health and recreation research work. Having the collared goats on the landscape did provide us the opportunity to do this mark recapture, mark recite work as well to check on how good our ground counts are. So I just want to close out my talk with a couple just management thoughts. Darryn Epp hit on it really well. Protecting females is really important for the population. 1 billy can breed many nannies, but nannies are the only ones that can make kids. So to have a population, the best thing we can do is protect females from harvest as much as we can. The Goat Alliance has an excellent educational video on this topic. I recommend it to all the hunters I talk with. Stephen Ernell, I believe, is the narrator, and goes all through the how to see how big your billy is, how to age, how to sex, goat management, goat population dynamics. About a 9-minute video, I think, and it's just a great one. And these are screenshots from it. And I'll say, I follow goat data really closely, and I'm proud to say the proportion of females in harvest has really dropped in recent years. Last 10 years, it really goes down. And there many years, I don't even get a female harvested at all. It's great. I believe this is due to hunters self-educating on the topic. So really grateful for resources like the RMGA puts out, things like the Spike Camp, where we can talk about the importance of trying to select for billies. But as we say, it is tricky. And sometimes hunters make mistakes. You're up at altitude, you're exhausted. There's a lone animal. It's 9.5 inches. It's got huge horns. There's some big nannies out there. Hunters have made mistakes. And one of the perks of my job is I love working with hunters. I love the passion hunters have when they go after goats. And I'll never forget one time I mentioned to a guy in the course of checking his female goat, his 3.5-year-old female goat, that she was just getting to prime age and just getting ready to start having babies. And I saw him kind of slump, and I realized I bummed him out. And he had a legal animal. This is a young guy who was just real happy he had a legal animal. And I realized, like, I'm not going to try to shame any hunter for what they end up getting. And I'll tell you, I had a hard one this year because it was really hard collaring goats. It was not easy. We didn't get nearly as many as we wanted. And I had a collared female that I'd actually darted from the ground and watched her recovery and her yearling and her kid and all their interactions. I kind of maybe got to know that goat a little bit. And this guy shot that female goat. He's an older hunter, 70-some years old, with emphysema and everything else. And he was just proud as punch of that goat. And I just had to bite my tongue and say, I will never shame somebody for a legal harvest. That being said, it's really good to educate people towards appropriate selection. But if you're up in goat country, hunting goats legally and ethically, and somebody harvests a nanny, I try to encourage folks not to make anybody feel bad about their once in a lifetime trophy. And just closing thoughts too, some findings on aging. The Bridger Mountains are kind of exceptional in Montana. I'm really proud of what we got there. Some areas produce really big billies at a really young age. These two billies came out of the Bridgers. They're both over 10 inches. But look at how different their faces are. The billy on the left was 2.5. The billy on the right was about 8. You can see how big his pads are too. And you can see that hump on his nose, that Roman nose. But they're both measured out about the same. The hunter on the left is actually a friend of mine. He's my accountant. And we talked about his billy being the baby-faced booner, because in Montana, if they're over 10 inches, that's pretty great. So he's got the baby-faced booner. But I like to show this side-by-side to try to help folks who come to my area, if they are interested in selecting a billy and a mature one, to consider looking at face shape in addition to other factors. But yeah, a trophy is what you make of it, whether it's you're out for horns, if you're out for hair. Some hunters want to get a November goat, which is really, really challenging, but boy, the hair on them is incredible. So your trophy is what you make it. And my last slide is, if your biologist tells you your goat is younger than you think, here's a cool fact, and here's how I know. Goats get about 1 incisor each year till they're 4-year-olds. So that little picture on the left is the incisors on the bottom jaw. And the baby teeth are tiny. When they're adult teeth, they're all kind of even, like in that picture. The first thing I do when I check a goat is I pull down the lip and I look at its incisors. If they still have baby teeth, even if that goat's 9 inches big, if that goat's 10 inches big, people will make up age rings because they won't believe they shot a 2-year-old goat that's 9 inches or 9.5 inches. In the Bridgers, they grow really big. And so I've definitely had folks check me and take teeth and send them to Matson's, and I'll be darned, their goat's young. So the age rings, the They are pretty deep. You often need an experienced biologist with it, because if you've never aged a goat before, and you've got a 9-inch goat or 9.5-inch goat, it could be young or it could be old. And anyway, you can do your best with those age rings. Once they get over about age 8, they get really hard to tell. I've gotten pretty close at a 13-year-old Billy. I think I called him 12, which isn't bad. Those rings get really close. The oldest Billy we've ever gotten in Montana that we've found so far is 14. So that's not too bad. Males live about 14, females to 16. That's the max that we've seen for both sexes. So, and that's my closing slide. Is I wanted to make sure you guys have my email. I want to be available as a resource to the public who's interested in goats or other wildlife management. I work for the public agency, so and of course links to the Goat Alliance.
Awesome. That was an amazing presentation, Julie. Thank you very much. We do have a couple. I think we got one question just came in. Blake, you got that there?
Yep. So we got a question from Clay Weber. He was just asking you, Julie, after a hunter harvests a goat in Montana, is there any kind of compulsory inspection? If so, what kind of data or biosamples are collected?
Yeah, we do have mandatory check. What we do is we take a tooth and we age it. And that's when we can get the feedback of how well we're doing with that. We confirm sex. And we measure the horns. So it's actually a pretty simple amount of data. Sometimes what I've been doing recently is swabbing goats, nasal swabs, whenever I can, just to try to test for presence of pneumonia pathogens, because I'm interested in the health of the goats in our area.
Oh, that's cool. I have a couple questions here. Blake and I have been sort of sharing notes as we go. One just popped into my head here in the last couple minutes of the last slide. Have you noticed any sort of environmental conditions that might lead, as far as like maybe soil or minerals and that kind of thing, that might lead, like you mentioned, the Bridger Mountains had big goats that like grow fast. Is there anything in particular hunters, of course, everybody wants a big one. I'm wearing the t-shirt from RMGA with Justin Koleski's goat on it right now. And, you know, that was an amazing animal. I'm just wondering if there's anything in particular that you've noticed in your area that might lead to, you know, faster development on goats.
Yeah, that's a good question, I guess. And my view, I think there's a genetic component. The Bridgers was founded with 13 goats. So I think we must have had a really good founding genetic. The Bridgers must have some good mineral nutrient supplementation and good nutrition. One of the things, a coworker of mine is Fred King. Some of you guys might know that name. He's a international Boone and Crockett scorer. And he reminds me that the cool thing about whether it's a sheep or a goat is horns as a secondary sexual characteristic. If an animal has good genetics, good habitat, can live a good adult long life, if it has what it needs to survive, and my wildlife management is good, then we're going to see those horns. But what's interesting is in other places where I manage, I almost never see 10-inch goats. I don't think it's related to density in my areas. One of my jokes is the Bridger Mountains is the backyard playground of Bozeman, and Bozeman is full of super athletic, wild, you know, the ridge run, people run 23 miles of 9,000 foot ridge line. So with all those uber athletes, one of my jokes is that all of that good pee gives the goats the best nutrients supplementation they can ask for. So that's just tongue in cheek, because I guess realistically, I'd love to get at the genetics and get more into learning about the micronutrients that can really drive that horn production.
Yeah, the ultimate electrolytes, I guess.
Yeah.
I think there's another question here. Clay had another one. Can goats see color or just shades of black and white?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question.
It would be hard to know, I think, but that's a good question. Julie, can you offer any advice for hunters? I mean, as far as researching goes for goat populations in specific areas. I mean, the obvious answer is call the bio, right? But any tips or ideas or suggestions?
Seriously, for goats and sheep, call the biologist. Like with elk, it's kind of like do a whole lot of your own research before you call the biologist, because I've counted 800 calls plus. I actually did the license plate game with a number of people who called me about wanting to come hunt elk in Montana, and I got all 50 states. If I just Google the area code where they're from, I got all 50 states within a year. So people are coming from all over. Where do I hunt elk in Montana? Call the biologist, get a special spot. I'm not giving anybody any special spots for elk, but goats are like a once in a lifetime deal, really. I mean, in Montana, you can drop more than once. In Montana, you have a 7-year waiting period and you put in again, but people put in for 20 some years before they draw. So I take it really seriously to spend a lot of time with goat hunters. And I really do want you to call me before you put in. Sheep too. Because for example, I've got a really tough backcountry unit for sheep, and every year I get people that put in and they don't realize what they got and they can't do it. They physically can't do it, and they've burned their points on a sheep unit. They can't cut it, and it's like because I have other areas where I could send a person. So depending on what you want, like if you want the best coat you can get, where can I hunt goats in November? I'll have different areas for you to think about. If you want the maximum horn production, I'll show you the statistics. I got all this at my fingertips. So you can do your research that way. And if you think about accessibility, I've had hunters put in their kids for tags to try to get their kids to draw bonus points. And then accidentally their kids draw it. And they're like, oh my God, my 12-year-old has to do this wilderness hunt. So it's really a good idea to know before you go, especially with something like goats or sheep, because maybe you'll get lucky and draw it again, maybe you won't. So do reach out to the bio. Give us time. There's times I'm in the field for 3, 4, 5 days at a time. I'm away from my phone. Personally, I respond to emails pretty quick, phone calls a little longer. But different bios are going to be different. But usually a quick email just saying, and if you do research beforehand, that always really helps. So if you email me, I want to hunt goats in Montana, I'll be like, hey, I manage, 7 goat districts. I can tell you about that. I can't tell you about goat hunting in all of Montana. I mean, I can a little, but do as much research as you can ahead of time and know what you want, and that'll help.
So what would you say?
I already found out about goat. Somebody in the chat knows about goats.
I see that. Yeah, I think that was Clay. He actually asked the question. Blake, go ahead, read that one off.
Yeah. So it looks like he Googled the answer. So what does he say? They are able to perceive short and long wavelength. They're able to use the strength of their signals to see colors. They have difficulty with the color red, but can see purples, blues, and greens.
Cool.
Interesting.
Thank you. I learned something. That's awesome. I love it.
I have a question.
Something new every day, right?
I've got a question for both Julie and Darryn. I was just curious if you could share, like Julie, you mentioned you had some pictures from one of your field days in the Bridger Mountains. I would just love to hear like one of your funnest, like coolest, wildest days in the mountains with goats.
Oh man. Well, I could either tell you one that makes me seem cool or very silly. I mean,
let's hear both.
You saw the winter pictures. We're up at like 9,000 feet. It was like negative 10 degrees, and the helicopter slinging us goats, and it was pretty awesome. But then we tried to capture them with clover traps during summer, and it's a highly recreated area. So like one area, they come in at night, and we put out salt bait. We bring them into salt. And we have to monitor the clover traps, which are like a box, and it drops a door on the goat. We don't want a goat just sitting in a trap in case the public come by it. So I have to be an attendant. So I'm like hiding in the bushes to pull a string to trap a goat. And then I get the right goat trapped. It was kind of fun because the game wardens gave me like night vision goggles, which are super cool. Like you look at the stars through night vision goggles. It's really great. So I'm hiding in the dark in the bushes because the goats are nocturnal because there's too much recreation here. And like the stuff people do at night in the woods, you can use your imaginations, but I'm like hiding there in the bushes and I'm thinking like, these people don't know I'm here, and they're like walking past me, and I'm like, God, I'm gonna get shot. I'll just stay really quiet, But people were partying, and couples were doing things, and it's just like, I'm just sitting here looking for goats, minding my own business. And yeah, the recreation stories go on and on. I mean, one place, I'm hiding in the bushes trying to trap goats, and realized it was the weekend, not the weekday. I'd lost track of time. I'd been out there for a week. And on the weekend, people from Bozeman just flooded the area. There were people swimming naked in the lake, climbing rocks, people flying drones, people on the ridge lines, people chasing their loose dogs everywhere. And one guy was backpacking with his cat. Yeah, it was backpacking with his house cat. And I was just like, all the goats blew out. They went and hid, and they didn't come back till Tuesday. So I'm sitting there in this basin trying to trap goats, like, I had them on camera coming into the salt, perfect. I was all ready for them, but it was the weekend and people, man.
That's
Oh,
funny.
awesome.
I saw it really quick from Eric McKay, unlimited district sheep areas. I don't manage the unlimited districts in Montana. If you guys don't know, Montana's got a pretty cool thing with bighorn sheep. We have unlimited entry where there's a quota. You have to get a legal ram. But like 100 people can have the license, and once it goes to 2 rams or whatever it is, they shut it down. I don't manage any sheep districts in the unlimited area. The biologist who does that is Michael Yarnell. I can get you that contact information. So Eric, if you got my email, you could just shoot me an email, and I'll send you to Michael, who manages those in Region 3. There's also some in Region 5, different biologists there.
Cool.
Awesome.
Darryn, I want to pose the same question to you, because I know you spend a lot of time photographing goats and in the mountains as well. Is there any cool experiences or a memorable moment you've had?
Well, certainly there's lots, because goats are pretty cool animals. But I would say one of the neatest ones was a couple of years ago now, where I come across a billy or actually several billies during the rut season in BC. And I was following them up, and they were interacting with females and stuff. Then I was headed back to the vehicle, and then noticed this one billy hanging out by himself on a ledge, and noticed that he had a bunch of hair on his horns and blood. So I spent a bunch of time with him, and was kind of close and taking photographs and stuff, and there was like blood everywhere. And I was really hoping to see his dance partner, but never didn't find his component or his opponent there during the time that I was there. So it would be pretty neat to see what happened and what the outcome was, because that's probably the only time I've seen that significant interaction. It's usually, when I see hair on horns, it's usually females, because they're pretty rough on the boys typically. If they're not receptive, they tend to be pretty grumpy, so they hook them, catch hair on their horns pretty regularly during the rut season, I found. So.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. This might be stupid, but do goats get territorial and fight like sheep and elk and other animals? Is that something that they do? I've never seen footage.
What I've seen, I spent the last couple of years in goat country during the rut, is and talked a bit with Val Geist over it, because he did a lot of that sort of stuff. And they don't battle quite as much as, say, sheep do, because they have such an ability to actually hurt each other really seriously. So it's what I've seen is a lot of posturing and not much actual physical contact. They're very strange goats compared to sheep. They're so the males are not dominant at all to females, because they whine and cry and kind of suck up and just look for those opportunities, but they're not really overly aggressive because of that ability too for the females to actually hurt them quite seriously. So what I've noticed is they're quite subtle and making lots of noises and stuff. But they, once the female's receptive, it carries on pretty much the same as sheep does. But males to each other, like I was out just in this last November up in some goat country, and it was a little bit prior to the rut itself, and the dominant male in that area was just going from herd to herd to let everybody know that he was the big guy on the block, and as soon as he showed up, all of the little ones scattered, and he was just checking females there, and if there was anything going on, and then he'd head back to the other groups that he was with. So yeah, it's I think a little less interactive because they know the damage that they can create. Though I know, at Val Geist's house when I visited him, he had two sets of horns that he had collected during his time observing goats in the North BC there, and he very detailed in his description of these two goats before he killed them, because he had a special permit to do so. These two billies were just hammering on each other, and one of his interests in actually taking them after that interaction was to see the damage that they created to each other, and the extra dermal layer that the goats would develop during the rutting season to prevent those punctures from getting through. And I think he described that these dermal layers were like 3/4 of an inch thick in some of those high contact areas, which was just fascinating to him, and also obviously to anybody that wouldn't expect that to be the case.
So they basically develop armor plating.
Yep, that's what he discovered during that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I have a question regarding goat behavior, something that we witnessed, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. Blake was with me. We were on a moose hunt with some other family members up in north central BC, and we were easily a couple 100 kilometers from the nearest real mountain range. And we were just driving down this trail, and we saw something running in the bush on the side of the road, and we stopped the truck and looked, and it was a young billy, and he was just running flat out, side to side, crossing the road in front of us. Remember that, Blake? He was nowhere near. I think the closest mountain range was like the Itcha Mountains. We were closer to Quesnel than we were to mountains. And then a few years later, we were on a sheep hunt. It wasn't quite the same, but we were on a river on a jet boat, and there was a goat down at the river, and again, miles from what you would think would be, real good goat habitat. Do they tend to go on a wandering mission or something? Yeah. Is this something normal? It is.
We've had goats come into Bozeman, which is incredible. If you search on social media, it was on different Bozeman Facebook pages. Oh my gosh, there's a goat in my yard. And it came down and wandered off. Yeah, I think that young billies do some of the dispersing and pioneering that we were talking about earlier.
Pioneers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had one this year in Alberta, actually, that was found along the Peace River down just south of Fairview, which has got to be 2 hours to drive. And I was talking to the regional biologist out of Rocky Mountain House, and she said she had the same with sheep as well. She had some down in Edson, which is at least an hour to drive from any range that wouldn't be sheep range. So, and same down in Utah, and everywhere we hear about these really unique jaunts that these animals, these young males typically do to find and create new opportunity.
Pioneers, like Julie said. Looks like we got a couple questions. We have a question from Gian. He's looking for resources for learning about goats, books. Other than The Beast, The Color of Winter, he says he hasn't found too much. Looks like Julie's pulling something up here.
This is a good one.
Okay.
I don't know, did it come out right or mirrored?
Yeah, it came all right. I didn't get the full title, but mountain goats, ecology,
Festa.
behavior, and conservation of an alpine ungulate, Marco
And this
Festa Bianche.
This is Caw Ridge. So this is
Oh,
what
wow.
Darryn was
Okay.
talking about earlier. And
yeah.
I mean, it's totally fantastic. Pretty scientific. And, but yeah, I've really been through it.
I believe also our website has a listing of a lot of materials, both studies and recommended books that are available as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just going to say we'll post up some resources and links after the fact, and maybe we can get this presentation, Julie, if that's possible, if you're allowed to do that. Maybe we'll post it up. We have a big resource section on the platform, so that would be great. Looks like we got one more question from Clay again. He's asking, the yearly snowpacks where goats access for water, are they diminishing in Montana from climate change? And if so, is it impacting the animals, such as movement or otherwise?
Well, that's something we want to watch. What I'll tell you is we're pretty fortunate in a lot of our area that there's still long-standing snowpack, still some glaciers in a lot of areas, mountain lakes that don't dry up. The Bridgers is an interesting one. It has got one lake that won't dry up in a bad year. And no glaciers, no standing snowpack. So if there's a really hot summer like we had in 2021, which was the year Goat Alliance, and we did a count and it just didn't work out because the heat was so bad and the smoke was so bad, I really didn't know what those goats did for water. And I've since really tried to explore the mountain range and figure out, are there seeps? You know, what could they possibly be doing? They all can't drink from the one lake that doesn't dry up, and that whole mountain range has one lake that doesn't dry up. It'll be interesting to see in the future. I hope we don't get too many more years like that. Last year was a great wet year. Somebody, when we asked about horn growth and development, wet springs with lots of good green vegetation will help them put on the nutrition they need to put on the horns. So one of the things to think about is the literal physiological impacts of being able to access water. And then another is what that's doing to the vegetation and how that comes out through the health of the animal, the fat that it needs to get through winter, its body condition, and of course things like horns. So, but I mean, then you think about goats are succeeding in the Black Hills where it is super hot. I don't know how dry it is. I know that they're succeeding in different ranges in Utah. So it is going to be interesting to see what is gonna happen with that. Climate change is definitely on the radar of a lot of amazing mountain goat experts from a big subject of what we talk about in the science committee. And Darryn, do you have a better perspective?
Well, I was just going to add too that BC is a very unique spot for that exact thing, because there's groups of goats through Summerland, Princeton, Karamias, a lot of areas that have no significant snowpack at all, and they live in sagebrush environments, and just a weird, you know, those things that we look at as important criteria for keeping goats cool and stuff in a general sense, those kind of areas have none of those at all. So the adaptivity or the ability to adapt must be significant within a certain time period, I suppose. If it happened too quick, they may not be able to adapt and suffer, but it seems like in some cases they certainly can adapt and live in environments that meet their basic needs and not necessarily those that we see as climate change critical.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the winter or lack thereof that we're experiencing here, at least in BC, is scary. We'll have to see how the animals adapt. It feels like they're going to have to adapt quickly this year for sure, unless we get some incredible snowfall over the winter. But it's definitely a concern for sure. So, well, I think we've got the questions all dialed. I just have to say this has been an amazing session. I want to thank both Darryn and Julie for your time. The presentations are awesome, and We had a lot of participation tonight, so thank you both. We're going to have Blake will post all of the contact information and presentations and that kind of thing as well up on the platform. And in closing, I just want to remind everybody this is session 1 of our goat camp. The second session is January 9th. The topic is going to be goat identification and some really cool discussion about the 4 seasons of goat hunting. We've got a couple of RMGA members, Marvin and Adam, are going to be joining us for that one. So I encourage everybody to mark that down in your calendars, watch your socials. We're going to be promoting all of these over the next few days. And then January 12th, Friday night, is going to be our wind-up session. And we've got a whole panel of very experienced goat hunters, guides, characters for sure. This is going to be a fun one. You don't want to miss that one. So once again, just want to thank you guys and all the members for participating tonight. This was fantastic. So thank you very much.